All right, welcome to the FTP2 video for Force Integration for academic year 2017. I'm Jim Kennedy at Fort Belvoir, Team 29.
And I'm Lieutenant Colonel Chris Hughes, also here at Team 29.
So a couple things for an errata sheet as we get started with this. The reading A that is currently identified on Blackboard is not the correct one. It wasn't updated. So Lyndon will provide that one to you to provide to students. That is, unless we get it changed on Blackboard first. The reading B is a holdover. It's not required. It's still the General De Niro Senate Armed Services Committee speech that should have been deleted and wasn't. And then it also shows a discussion paper that we did for 16 that's still there. So just tell your students not to do reading B or the discussion question. And finally, the other one is...
We just had some recommendations from students after going through the practical exercise with them. So we've added some of those, and one of those is to identify the Brigade Combat Team XO early and then have the students read the PE student instructions before class so they don't have to come to class and digest that. They already have an idea what we're going to be doing.
Here are the links to the other curriculums. Pretty simple, pretty standard what we did last year. These are the ELOs and TLOs. They haven't changed for this coming year except for the number, but the verbiage still remains the same. So this is the lesson breakout for this year. It's different than last year. All the G&I and the publishing process, all that's up front. And the second hour is a PE. The purpose of the PE is to get them to see the application of these different topics we're going to talk about in a realistic environment, as well as to give them the skills to help scaffold them into the F107 PE that they'll do in a couple of weeks. This is just the same. You can read through this on what each one of these is. There's a new CE that we talk about. We'll cover that in a minute. And then the developed piece of it is the PE, where they'll actually do a unit converting from an infantry to a striker brigade. And any apply is delayed until F107. There's no assessment on this directly, no quiz or discussion paper, but the PE is part of the contribution to learning grade. So these are the instructor resources. A couple things we ask you to do because there are significant changes and updates to the class this year from previous years. We really recommend that you read the reading because it is updated for personnel, for the Army Manning Guidance, for the SRP and equipment piece. Those are new or they're updated. Review the slides, make sure you go with that. We also recommend watching the G&I video that we put on Blackboard that is identified right here on your Blackboard sheet. So if you look at Blackboard, you'll see right in here the Force Integration Instruction video. That's for students as well as for instructors to watch, just to get us talking about how we teach the slides in class. So it's basically our G&I for my class. We also recommend that you visit the G8 website, see a couple of their things that are there. And all of these items here are listed in the instructional video or in the instructor portion of the Blackboard homepage for instructors. So recommend you do that. Plus also give us a call with any questions. You're welcome to do that. So for changes for this coming year, as we mentioned, we have revised the CE. We'll cover that in a minute. We added the second hour of the PE. We talked about that. One thing that was missing the last couple of years was we talked about the equipping documents, but we didn't talk about how we distribute equipment. So we've added that process in. There's a whole slide on that, and the lesson plan outlines that pretty good. We redesigned the priority documents slide. We dropped some of the minutia details that are just kind of not relevant to these guys at this moment when you're doing one over the world. From the Manning point, we streamlined the reading. We added some slides to the reading to help them link the reading to the slides in the material. We have an addendum in the reading that explains SRP and why we're going from R4 Gen to SRP. We bolded key points as an educational technique within the reading to pull those out. And we took out a lot of the in-depth detail that was kind of the guidance for lesson authors this year. Let's see, we updated the Army Manning Guidance with the current one for 1619. We changed the SRP, which has changed from last year's slides. CDIRT is now the non-standard equipment AROC. We added a graphics organizer and study guide, and I'll show you what that looks like as an educational technique. Some of the students or a lot of hours. We've used it for about 3 classes now.
Yep, about 3 classes.
And the students like it. So it looks like this. Everything you see in yellow this is the answer guide that you can provide the students after the class. But you see where the blanks are. They just read right through it, answer the questions as they go through their reading A. And it helps them encode the material into their schematic memory as just another modality to help learn. Some of the students use it and enjoy it. Some of them don't because they just don't need it, and that's fine.
But regardless, at the end of the study guide, it gives them another tool to study for the exam.
Correct. So it's the students who use it like it, and it's posted on Blackboard. Here, the student study e-guide with the misspelling there. But students will have that, and they can use that if they want to. But it's voluntary, so don't make them do it if they don't want to. Getting back to the lesson here, we've added a G&I video that we've already showed you where that is. That's optional for the students. Our students like them. Some watch it before class, some watch it afterwards to say, hey, I didn't understand slide 6. And so they go back and see what we mentioned on slide 6 or talked about there. And then we just added a summary in the next slide class. So that's the summary of the changes. So it's quite different than last year. I think now we get into the meat of the class lesson slides. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
All right, I'm going to start off with the introduction slide, go through the CE, and then start some of the G&I, and then Jim and I will just pass back and forth through the G&I. So everybody should be familiar with this slide. Now, hopefully the students at this point at F105 are also familiar with the slide. It's just the easier to use force management model, highlighting it in 3 different groups: the strategy and capability in F101, F102, force development, 103 alpha, 103 bravo, 104, and then it gets to our class, so for 105, so force integration, covering the acquired, train, and distribute of personnel and material into the SRP process to provide train and ready units for COCOM commanders. And then next slide. All right, so this is our CE, our concrete example. So we thought, how can we let students know that they actually use force management principles and force integration in their day-to-day activities? And this is just an example we came up with. So think about when you're going on a family camping trip to a national park. You know, you're planning out 6 months ahead, so things you got to consider. And what we do is we put this into .mil/pf domains for them to kind of see. So like you're going to go on a camping trip, you got to buy a tent to go on that camping trip. So you do research. So leadership and education on buying that tent. You then go and buy the tent. So acquisition, material, and then you put up the tent. So again, training. How are you training that tent? So all different type of things that you have to think of when you're going on a camping trip. You can relate back to force integration and the .mil/pf domains. So it's just kind of a fun way to kind of get them to think about that. So we recommend just doing that in a think, pair, share. The person next to them at their desk, and then you can brief it out to the class, and then kind of help them see through .mil/pf domain how they actually use this. All right, so this is what the lesson is all about. This is the force integration class. So we're going to start off talking about some prioritization documents. Then we're going to talk about personnel and equipment and how they are integrated to provide training ready units for COCOM commanders, keeping in mind the ethical priorities throughout the entire lesson. All right, and then just let them know, hey, this is force integration. What is it all about? It's really about the synchronization in time and space of the .mil/pf domain solutions to fill required capability gaps to provide, again, trained and ready units for the COCOM commanders' missions. And keep it in mind at the bottom, we have the PPVE process down there because all the capability gaps are integrated into that PPVE process, and then also the ethical stewardship across the entire process itself. All right, so these are the 4 Army prioritization documents that we discussed. So starting off actually with a joint prioritization document, the FADM. So the Force Allocation Decision Model, which is the grand strategic guidance from the joint staff, taking information from the GEF and the GIF map to provide prioritizations for force allocation. So the overall grand strategic guidance, which then informs the ARPL, which is the first of the Army prioritization documents, the Army Resource Priority List, which is the Army strategic guidance. And this is breaking down Army units into 4 major categories for classification and prioritization of those units as resources, which then feeds the IRPL, the Integrated Requirement Priority List, which is the operational guidance for specific Army missions. So you got the IRPL that is prioritizing the missions, while you have the ARPL, which is prioritizing the units. And then you have the Dynamic Army Resource Priority List, the DARPL. which is the tactical level guidance, which is going to assign those UICs, those units, those resources to the ERPL missions. And then all these resource prioritization documents also inform downstream systems like GCSSA and SAMUS, who are going to give you the who, what, and the when. So if a unit has a higher priority based on its mission from the ARPL and the ERPL, then that will be reflected in GCSSA and SAMUS. All right, so pass over to Jim for personnel.
Okay, so part of force integration, as Chris mentioned, is all these different activities up here are going on. There's training going on, family support, doctrine, sustaining the force, but we're only going to talk personnel and equipment. That's what this slide shows to get the students' minds into what we're going to talk about. So personnel and equipment going in to form units and organizations, and then they'll do unit training. So the personnel, this chart combined a couple from last year. We've added the majors indicators to show where majors will work in the generating force. So here's covers the spaces and faces piece of it before. What the G3 is doing, what the G1 is doing, the Army Manning Guidance, which is the next slide. The lesson plan will lay out this in a little bit of depth. You'll notice we took out the PMAD and the UAD from this. It's just not relevant for what they need to know. And they'll get it to the, okay. This slide is similar to last year. I don't think anything changed except for the quote up here at the top, because this is really what the Army goes into the Army Manning Guidance, how we communicate change to the Army. The emphasis here is on how it's a G1 document, but it's heavily influenced by what the G357 puts into it, and then HRC implements it. And this is an updated chart from last year. If you remember last year, it was 5 columns. Whatever they were, it doesn't matter. But they are only 3 now, and this is for the active component. National Guard and Reserve have different ones. But we like to, the purpose of this is just to say, okay, which units are in there? Are you surprised at any? Are you surprised at the percent fills that they are? Just get a little bit of discussion so they know what's going on. This chart is the same as before, except we've added the majors indicators here to show where majors are doing, acting as account managers or as assignment officers. One thing with this slide, though, is these numbers in here, 700 officers available versus, those are made up numbers, but it's designed to show you that who's available versus the number of requirements and openings that are out there. That's all identified up here, but in the Manning Conference, they may get rid of some of those assignments based on the Manning Guidance and what priorities or fills they are. But just because there's an assignment open doesn't mean that an officer will be sent to fill it. So the lesson plan will lay out how this operates, but again, the top part is the account manager acting on behalf of the organization, the assignment officer acting on behalf of the branch and the officer, meeting at the Manning Conference, determining which of these assignments is going to be validated, which officers are open, sending out the OMLs, getting the requisitions built, and officers or get orders. And it's done twice a year. This is for the officers' assignment process. This next chart, it hasn't changed from last year. It's still indicating, don't worry about the numbers. It's an old chart, but the concept's still the same. We have a lot of enlisted soldiers and officers as well. But by the time you go through the different buckets of who's available, you've got a very small population. So there is a methodical process to it. We don't want to get into talking about the enlisted assignment process because it's way too complex because of different ranks and whatnot. But just this process still applies to officers and NCOs and soldiers. Chris.
All right. Yep. So as Jim was saying, personnel obviously goes into force integration, but also the other side of this is equipment. So now let's take a look at how the equipment piece is integrated. So it begins at during the DAS at force integration. It begins at the end of phase 4, beginning of phase 5 of the DAS. So you can kind of link that in with the students. So F104, we talked about the DAS, but force integration, F105 actually begins in the DAS. So when equipment is actually transferred over to the unit at the end of phase 4, before phase 5 begins, that's where force integration begins. All right, so we talked about some resource prioritization documents. Now we're going to talk about some equipping prioritization documents. So of course, it all starts with the National Strategic Guidance into the Army Plan, produces posture statement and budget estimate. You want to also tell the students how that influences these other documents. The first one being the Army Equipment Modernization Strategy, focusing on the fact that this is for the acquisition and resourcing communities, letting them know, hey, this is where Department of the Army wants to go forward in its equipment strategy. So it's the macro view, letting them know where we want to invest. Then you also have the Army Equipping Guidance. This is more the tactical level guidance, which is focusing on, hey, units, we're planning to push this stuff out, start for your planning purposes, things of that nature. So letting the units know this is what the equipping guidance is coming out. Then you have the other third document, which is the Army Equipping Program in support of the President's budget, primarily for Congress, to let them know, hey, along with our budget submission and the POM, these are some of the pieces of equipment that we're thinking about producing. All right, now this is a new slide. This is a 2-year-old process, so it is being used, but just kind of to explain the workings of it so you can explain to the students. So 3 key players on this slide. In the red, you have the unit there saying, hey, this is what I'm short through PBUs, GCSSA, DERS A. You have the Army Material Command, which is the lead material integrator for DoD, for Department of the Army. So the Army Sustainment Command actually is the executive agent for the Army Material Command, who's the lead material integrator. And then you have Army G8 and the project program managers. So all 3 of these have information that's going into the LMI DST, so the Lead Material Integrator Decision Support Tool. So you see the different type of information that is going into it. So the unit's sending information into the Logistics Information Warehouse through PBUs, GCSSA. You have the Lead Material Integrator providing the equipment distribution piece. Hey, this is how we see equipment being redistributed across the Army. And then you have new equipment that's going to be going out there that is just informing the LMI DST tool. So the type of information going in there, unit SRP modules, equipment DARPL prioritizations, equipment readiness, all those different things are influencing, hey, how are we going to take equipment that's out there across the force and redistribute to fill shortages? So all that information goes into the LMI DST and then pushes out a proposed sourcing solution. So unit A has a shortage. Based on the information that's collected in the DST, it is given a prioritization and say that unit needs to have this equipment. So that's the proposed sourcing solution. It gets vetted with the stakeholders. And then if it's approved, there is a MRO that is cut, and then off it goes to fill that shortage. So that is how the unit and the LMI, the material integrator, influence DST. The Army G8 and PMs, they inform it with just, hey, this is new equipment that's coming out. So it's not really deciding what equipment's going to be redistributed to what unit, but it's saying, hey, this unit's already getting this fielding, so perhaps you want to push off that fielding of this redistributed equipment to another time. So it just informs what's going on. The other 2 key things to keep in mind here are the UERWG and the AERWG. So the unit equipment reuse working group, which it can be delegated down to the division level, allows the commanders on an installation to say, we've got all this excess on our base. We want to be able to redistribute it. So let's hold a UERWG and redistribute it. So they can be done down at the division level to be able to provide oversight of a redistribution of equipment on that installation. So not going from installation to installation, but on that installation. And then you have the Army Equipping Reuse Working Group, which is a semi-annual meeting, which really focuses more on policy and higher level concerns. So the UERWG focusing on the unit level redistribution of personnel, equipment, and then the AERWG, which is focusing on policy for the redistribution of equipment.
And just to tag on, I sat in on the AERWG a couple weeks ago, and there's also a new term you may hear out there, that the UERWG-C that some of your students may bring up, that is core and above. So you may see that in Korea, where Korea just looks across the peninsula and says, here's what we need to do. So that's just a little higher up than the procedural UERWG. So that's just a term you may hear some of the students talk, or 3 Corps may do it for all their subordinate units.
Back over to you, Jim.
Okay, so now we've got everything that's put together, and we've got the unit down at Camp Swampy doing everything in the motor pool, doing unit training. So now they're ready to be put into the sustainable readiness model, which is a different model than we taught last year. This is all provided for us by the Army G357 and their points of contact up there. You need to understand that they have been very close hold with a lot of this, because a lot of it is pre-decisional. So they've approved all of our slides and our reading. They were very helpful, though. I'm not trying to say anything negative about them being close hold. They just are worried about getting ahead of things and changes that may be coming. There's also information that would be more helpful to students if we could get it. But it would make it FOUO, and trying to put FOUO in a lesson plan that we might as well just go ahead and solve world hunger and then get to the FOUO. But an example of that is with each one of these modules, there will be C ratings applied to each one of those. So that would be something that would be nice to know. But when the reg comes out in January, February, I think this is when it's actually going to be published. Yeah. That'll help explain a lot more to them. The other thing we have to all do with this is the way that the Army's going. We all have to be positive about it. We all have to say that we think this is a good idea, that the Army's moving in the right direction, that it's better than R4Gen. If you don't understand why it is, you need to give us a call. But we cannot be going into the room saying, well, this is just another process. Somebody needed an MSM, so they changed it. We can't be talking negatively about it in front of the students. The students have to accept this as a better model, or an anticipated better model, for different reasons than we had R4Gen.
And just to add on to that, when you do the reader for the class, at the back page there is a piece of it's an addendum to the regulation that does a very good job of explaining the differences between SRP and R4Gen. Okay. So I would recommend just reading that so you have a response to the student, because they will ask you, they will, why is this better than R4Gen? This looks a lot like R4Gen. Well, that reader, that addendum at the back of the reader, kind of explains why it is.
And that's a good point. And that addendum was written by the 2 points of contact, the two colonels who are leading the effort for G357 and briefing the chief. So they're the experts in the Army on it. And unfortunately, we can't give you a lot more data to support why this is better, because it's all FOU and it's all pre-decisional. So we can't really give the students a lot of information to make a decision. They just kind of have to accept that this is where we're going and it's supposed to be better. So I hope that helps with everybody on this. Now, to get to the slide, there are 3 modules and they're managed by quarter. So everybody will be assigned which one you get, and it does apply to all 3 components. The reserve component will predominantly be in the prepare most of the time because of their training schedules, and it's just the way they're designed. Not necessarily by these items here. But when you have a mission, an assigned or an allocated mission, that's where you'll be in mission. And one of the things that they're trying to decide is, when does mission start? Does it start at LAD? Does it start the month before LAD? Does it start the quarter you're in? Does it start the quarter before your LAD? So those are some of the pre-decision things that haven't been decided that we're aware of yet. So there's still some decisions to be coming out of this. Ready, the purpose behind Ready is, and SRP is, it's to buy as much readiness as we can. We don't need every armor brigade to be at C1 every day. We can't deploy them all. We may not need them all. So SRP looks at the total requirements, the known requirements, the planned requirements, and the war plan requirements, and says, okay, how many of X do we need? I don't know how many armor brigades we have off the top of my head, but let's just say we have 7 armor brigades. Or no, let's say we have 10 armor brigades. Well, we may only need 7 for the foreseeable future for missions and ready, so they will take the other 3 and put them in prepare. Because how much training can you buy for other echelon above brigade units if an armor brigade is not going to gunnery, is only doing team level training, company level training, those types of things for 6-8 months. So that's the reason for it, is to help buy readiness across the force as opposed to keeping everybody. That's what the band of excellence means as they go through the planning of what they're going to need. Same with missions to Korea. The unit going to Korea is not taking their equipment wholesale, so do they need as much maintenance, O&M money for equipment and training at home station before they go to Korea because they're not taking their equipment? Maybe, maybe not, but that's kind of the process of thinking about this. Because you can still be going on a mission and be C2 or even C3 because your equipment back at Fort Hood is not, you don't have it all, or it's not ready as far as maintenance wise, but you're not taking it to Korea where you're going to fall in on working stuff. So that's kind of some of the logic behind it. There's still things to be worked out. Prepare is by exception for the active component. So those are the ones who you'll be either, it's a headquarters decision or you're redesigning, restationing. Those are some ideas there. But the goal is to get the majority of the force in ready. So that then takes us to building the Army. This is just kind of a snapshot over time, how it goes out. You come up with an idea back in 13. These blue blocks show you all the different big muscle movements that take place to build a unit. And then the little green circles show you all the F100 classes with strategic change management taking place all over the time. F103, F104, F105 is the red box here. And then eventually you get a unit available. Students will say, well, this takes too long. Well, yes, it does, because it's a deliberate process, but it can be faster. The 1st Stryker Brigade went from first man in the motor pool to Iraq in 3 years. So 0 to 0 in 3 years, that was pretty fast, and it was successful. So this is just a deliberate process to make sure everything works out in an integrated fashion. So this is just a new slide that summarizes everything we talked about for the students. This would be a good slide for them to study potentially for their final. So that's the lesson slides all together. So quickly we'll go over the PE. The PE requirement, they're just going to back brief their plan in these 4 groups. You can break the students up. You can let the identified BCTXO break them up, whichever one you want to do. We give them about 30 minutes to do the work, 10 minutes to do the brief, and a 5-minute discussion. We provide them the slides and instructional packet are on Blackboard. I'll show you where they are, as well as some backup data that we give them. But when you're letting them work at 30 minutes, call it. Just stop. They may not be done. It doesn't matter. The purpose is not to get to the answer. The purpose is for them to talk amongst themselves, come up with thoughts. Is the personnel unit going to? Is the personnel group going to talk to the facilities group about barracks rooms? Is the training group going to talk to the facilities group about ranges or whatever? We did this. We did a pilot with our staff groups in our last class, and they thoroughly enjoyed the PE. The lesson plan cautioned them to put this on slides to back brief, but we found it better just let them
use the whiteboards in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes a lot faster, and encourage them to provide a timeline for each of those groups of personnel, equipment, facilities, and training, and then that'll help them see, hey, we need to work with the personnel people before we go to the facilities people, because we need to know how many people are coming in. So if we need to increase barrack space, so they'll see using the timeline, the commonalities, the linkages between all of them, which is really what we're trying to get to in force integration.
Exactly. Because they'll say, this is very complicated, it's very hard. Well, yes, it is, Major. And guess who gets to solve this at the unit level? And that's the other thing. We're not looking for solutions of how to solve this. It's just these are the areas of our concerns, right?
You don't need to get everything discussed, just some ideas up there to get this conversation going.
And then after that, or before you do that, whichever one you want to do, this is just a teaser for the next class, just so you know what's coming next. Is when we don't have enough personnel and equipment, we're going to contract, and we're going to talk about how we plan and manage contractors in 106. So the PE slides that we give them, we give the students these. They have this is out of the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Some people may, some of your students may have been in one that's different structure. Have everybody just use these. The answer is not important, it's the process. So this is the current approved structure about for 17. So there's the infantry that they currently have and the Stryker that they're going to. And then here's a draft slide timeline that they can use for them with all the key dates that they need to know. And then on the instructor kind of answer notes, which we didn't pull up, we have some what it kind of should look like, but that's on you to look at. Here's what we give the students. The task condition standard, they're at 310 BCT, which is on purpose. We picked 310 because it's the only BCT at that installation. There's nobody else to go to for help. And it's very limited terrain out there. So they do all this. We induced a lot of conflict, or a lot of, not confusion, but conflict. Within this, in other words, we told them all these different things that are going on. When you're talking equipment, there's 257 of them coming in, and here's where they are, so they don't have to spend time looking at FMS Web. Don't worry about the toolkits are going to change, the special tools, the whatever. anything else, the weapon systems or radios or installation kits are going to change. Just worry about this, because this is the big piece. Well, are they going to identify, yes, there's 257 coming in, but are they going to identify that there's 257 Humvees now in the motor pools that they have to find somewhere to put? So wherever you see a Humvee or a Striker going in, assume a Humvee's going out. And then we get into the other statuses we give them. You don't have enough supply sergeants. A lot of company command changeover going on. 9 more companies. CGSC graduation's coming up, so they're going to be coming in. 15 majors are coming out. Not enough people trained in striker mechanics. So we introduced a lot to them to think about, which is pretty realistic when you do this. And here's the number of mechanics that they have by unit. Here's the number of seats they have for their training. And so just let them talk and come up with their own ideas of, okay, what problems are we going to have, boss? Here's what we're going to have to figure out. And we were quite surprised and pleased with the answers our students gave us. I took some pictures of the board. I meant to include them here, but I didn't. But yeah, just have them brief off the whiteboards. Don't make them put them on PowerPoints, because the purpose is not to make a PowerPoint chart. The purpose is to talk and brief, what they came up with in their discussions. But that's all force integration, is making all that happen and get put together. And I believe, subject to any questions, that concludes our FDP2. Is that it?
Yep, that's all we got. So good luck, and let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, give us a call. Look us up on Global. Find us. I think our phone number is on the lesson plan there, email. So give us a call. Good luck to us, and let us know AAR comments. Let us know what the students find in their PE that's not on the instructor quote solution guide, because there are no right answers for that. If they come up with good ideas, let us know so we can add it and provide it to other instructors as well. So thank you very much for your time. Good luck.